Okay, so welcome, ladies. Welcome to today's edition of Wealth Clinics with me, Dr. Yewande. And today I'm actually really excited about this topic, the topic of budgeting, and not just budgeting for anybody, but specifically budgeting for busy women, because we know that it's something that we're supposed to do. We've heard it over and over again. Maybe we've tried different strategies. We know that things could be better, but we're too busy to try all these complicated strategies that people offer, or maybe we've tried them and it just hasn't stuck. So today we're going to be going through different examples. I'll go through the agenda, but I hope that by the end of the session today, you'll have a better understanding on how to budget and how to make it work for you. I'm going to start by sharing this slide here. So this slide is me and one of my really good sister friends. Her name is Shuri. And we travel a lot together. Oh, before kids, we used to travel a lot together. So these pictures include Jamaica, Dominican Republic, Lagos is there, Las Vegas is there. And Shuri and I, we have very different personalities. Shuri is very meticulous, right? She likes things organized. She likes to know where she is, where she's going at a certain time. There was a time where you could literally predict on Thursday at 8 p.m., this is where Shuri is, right? So she's very structured in her time. Whereas me, I like to have a general idea of where we're going, what we're doing, and I kind of go with the flow that way. So I have some structure, but it's not as rigid, it's not as tight. So whenever we would travel, Shuri would know 8 o'clock, we wake up, then we go to the breakfast hall, we have our breakfast. Then by 12 o'clock, we're by the pool. By 6 o'clock, like she would have everything and our days would flow that way. And whenever we would travel as well, on day one, she's taking us to the booking sessions where we book all the excursions and all of that. So she's very organized, very structured that way. Whereas me, I tend to go more with the flow, even till this day. And I say all that to say that at the end of the day, both of us, we still enjoyed our time. We still had a good time. So the one that was very structured in her approach to time allocation, the one that was more relaxed in her approach to time allocation, at the end of the day, we still had a wonderful time. And I'm going to come back to this illustration as I talk about budgeting. If this is your first time catching any of my presentations or hearing my voice, seeing my face, I'm Yewande. I am the founder and CEO of Her Wealth Grows. In addition to being a medical doctor, psychotherapist, I'm also a financial literacy educator. And all that means is I love to simplify the language of money. I love to elevate the financial and also emotional well-being of women, because I believe that when we do that, it sets us women up for living wealthy lives. And when I say wealth, I don't want to scare you off. Wealth, of course, means money, an abundance of money. But in addition to that, and I believe even more importantly, an abundance of joy, of peace, a sense of fulfillment. So when I say wealth, it's not just about money. It goes way beyond that. And my hope today is that by the end of this talk, you'll have even more strategies and tools to elevate your financial well-being and set yourself up for a wealthy life. So what are we going to be doing? I'm going to be talking about 3 common budgeting myths and why they're not true. I'm going to be doing a quick overview of different types of budgeting systems and who they're appropriate for, who they're not really appropriate for. And then I'm going to talk about my favorite way to budget, because I believe it's the simplest way for us, especially as busy women. We want something that's simple, but something that's still effective. Then I'm going to be going through 3 examples and then, of course, opening it up for questions. So myth number 1. Myth number 1 is one that I see everywhere and one that puts a lot of pressure on us as busy women. Budgeting means tracking every dollar spent. And there are 2 reasons why this myth is not true. First of all, tracking is not the same as budgeting. Dave Ramsey says that budgeting is spending your money on paper before spending it in real life. Tracking is something that I love to do. I really love to go back and see if I can identify patterns in my spending habits, if I've slipped back into my ways of shopping on Amazon or buying things that I don't need. Tracking is very useful for identifying patterns and habits. But it's retrospect, right? It's looking backwards. Budgeting, on the other hand, is actually looking forward. It's planning in advance, right? It's making sure that at least you have some sort of structure in place so that when you actually move forward, you're spending your money in a way that makes you happy. Going back to my vacation example, tracking would sort of be like at the end of vacation, we're looking back and saying, oh, maybe we could have done this differently. Next time we travel, we'll do things differently. Or maybe we shouldn't have gone there, or maybe we shouldn't have gone there. Oh, this was good that we did this. This wasn't good. That's sort of like tracking. But budgeting is before vacation, actually saying, okay, these are the things that we would like to do. So we need to know that when we get there, we need to book this restaurant here, or we need to book this trip there, right? Budgeting is being more proactive, whereas tracking is more retrospective. So the idea that you have to track every dollar isn't necessarily true when it comes to budgeting, because first of all, it's backwards. And second of all, it can be quite overwhelming. Like I said, yes, I love tracking. I love being able to go back and see what my spending habits are, but that's not really what budgeting is. It can be quite overwhelming to do that. Now, if budgeting isn't tracking, what is budgeting? I believe it's a strategy. I believe it's a set of spending instructions. It's a spending plan. I also love to call it cash allocation. And I've used this example many times before, but I'm going to say it again. A lot of us have this experience where you've either hired a nanny or a babysitter, or maybe someone in your community to watch your kids. And when they come over and they say, okay, I'm here, where are the kids? As women, I know that if you're on this call, you are someone who is very diligent, right? You wouldn't be on this call if you didn't care about things being done a certain way. So you would never leave your child with a caregiver without giving them a set of instructions. Okay, this is what he likes to eat. This is what she likes to do. This is the time they need to be getting ready for bed. These are the books that I like you to read them. They're not allowed to watch this show. They're allowed to watch this show. So you give them a set of spending instructions. Because if you don't do that, what ends up happening is you get home, maybe the caregiver is on their phone, maybe the child is under the table somewhere or in a closet somewhere, and things are just so chaotic. But when you proactively give them instructions and say, this is what I expect of you, things just run much smoothly. And I like to think of our money like an employee or someone that you hire. It comes into your life, but you need to give it instructions of where to go and also what to do when it gets there. That's why I love the idea of cash allocation, because you're allocating your cash to different spending expenses. You're giving it different assignments. And so the same way you would give an employee an assignment to do, you're also giving your money an assignment. So going on to myth number 2, this is another one that I hear so commonly. Right? People will say, oh, budget restricts my freedom, right? Whenever they say that, I'm like, okay, is budget, like, is it handcuffs? Is it shackles? Like, put the shackles off my feet, right? Your budget is not shackles. It's not handcuffs. It actually isn't restricting your freedom, even if you think so. So I'm going to give you an example that I hope will resonate with you. So imagine that you've been working, and finally you have a day off work. And on the day of work, you say, okay, finally, all these things that I've been planning to do, I'm going to get to do them today. So whether it's rearrange your closet, whether it's cook up some food for the week, whether it's whatever it might be, do your hair, do your nails, whatever it might be, you have this long list of things that you want to do. And the list, you don't bother putting it down. You don't bother writing it down. And even if you write it down, you don't bother saying, okay, from this time to this time, this is what I'm going to do. From this time to this time, this is what I'm going to do. From this time to this time, this is what I'm going to do. How many of you have had, I know that I have had this experience many times. So how many of you had had the experience where it's the day off, the morning, you feel so excited, you wake up, yes, I'm going to do all these things. And then before you know it, it's 6 p.m., 7 p.m., and you've barely done anything. The time just seems to have slipped through your fingers. And you end up feeling frustrated, you end up feeling annoyed, like you wasted the whole day. Honestly, it's the same thing with our money, where you don't, when you don't assign it, when you don't allocate it, it's not causing you restriction. It's actually giving you more freedom, because you know where your money is going. You're not constantly using mental energy at the back of your mind, wondering, oh, do I have enough? Do I not have enough? What are we doing with this money here? What are we doing with this money there? That's not freedom. That's not freedom. But when you have some sort of structure, no matter how flexible it is, or if you're the rigid type, no matter how rigid it is, at least you have some sort of structure, and it actually gives you more freedom than just allowing things to, giving yourself that false sense of freedom, spending your money however you want to spend it. I'm just going to quickly check the chat. Takwa says, I know, right? Very frustrating. And it's just so interesting that as soon as we decide to put the money, put our time to a certain, allocate our time, just at least write the list and say, in the morning, I'm going to do these 2 things. In the afternoon, I'm going to do these 2 things. It ends up being so much more productive for us. So the third myth that I want to address is budgeting is too hard. Budgeting is too hard. Budgeting is too hard. That's a myth that I want to spend some time debunking today. So budgeting is too hard is something that comes from the idea, or not realizing that budgeting is a skill. It's a skill. Just like learning to ride a bike is a skill, learning to swim is a skill, learning a new language is a skill, budgeting is a skill. And people have this false idea that if I don't get how to budget now, then I'm never going to get it. In psychology, we call that all or nothing thinking, that if I don't get it now, then there's no point, I'm never going to get it. And I see that a lot as well. The truth is, when we actually understand how the mind works when it comes to building habits, and this is something that I love to teach my students because it makes such a big difference. If you understand that in order to build a habit, you need to have a reminder. Sometimes when people are starting on an exercise journey, I'll say, you know what, just if you're planning on walking every day, just put your shoes by the door, or put your shoes by your bed, where you can see it, where you have that visual reminder. Because when you have that visual reminder, you're more likely to say, you know what, let me just put on these shoes and take this walk. But it's kind of like out of sight, out of mind. If you don't have any reminders, it's going to be very difficult to initiate that habit. The other thing I like to teach is reduce that habit to the smallest possible structure, to the smallest possible unit, right? Psychologists have researched this, and the way our brains work is that sometimes when we don't want to do something, we make it seem like this overwhelming task, and it just seems like this big mountain in our minds, and we end up saying, you know what, I don't have time for it, or I'll do it another time when I'm less tired, or I just don't have the energy, or what's the point? So it becomes this overwhelming mountain. Whereas when you bring it down to the smallest possible unit, so if we're talking about budgeting, for example, instead of thinking about, oh, now I have to gather all my receipts, or now I have to gather all my documents, I have to figure out all my login passwords, and it starts to look like this impossible task, just say, I'm going to spend just 5 minutes. I'm just going to spend 5 minutes today reviewing my accounts. I'm going to spend 5 minutes today gathering the information that I need. And you just tell yourself it's just 5 minutes. The truth is, by the time you start, by the time you reduce that mountain into a little molehill, right, and you get over it and you start, then the momentum kicks in. The momentum kicks in. So when you sort of exaggerate or make this budgeting thing seem like this big deal that I've tried for many years and it's never worked, it becomes almost like what's the point? Almost like a hopeless situation. But if you say just today, all I'm doing today is gathering my receipts or writing the list of my expenses, right? If that's all you're going to do today, then you call it a success for the day. So bringing down the habit to the tiniest piece. I also like to teach the concept of rewarding yourself. And the reason why this is important is because the way our brains work is what we call positive reinforcement. Positive reinforcement. It's kind of like how when trainers, maybe in the zoo, when they're training animals or pets, or even with your kids, when you praise them, when you reward them, they're more likely to do the habit again. They're more likely to do the activity again. So maybe your child, maybe your child took their first steps and everybody's clapping and praising the child. They're going to get excited and want to keep doing it again. And that's the importance of rewarding yourself, celebrating yourself when you accomplish something, that even if it's that 5 minutes of a habit that you're trying to do, just patting yourself on the back, saying, good job, Talkwell, good job, Binkbe, good job, just sort of hyping yourself up, right? Because your brain is going to be like, oh, that felt good. We should do that again. And that's how habits form. That reward piece is very important. And then you repeat the cycle. So remind, reduce, reward, repeat. And this works for any habit. I've had people who have started exercising. I had someone who hadn't exercised in years. She said she used to love taking walks. She used to love taking walks and she hadn't taken walks in years. And now she's been walking consistently for 3 weeks straight, every day for 3 weeks, because she followed this process. So now I'm going to talk about the different types of budgets. And I'm sure you've heard of most of these, if not all of these and more. There's a ratio method, which I'm sure you may or may not know by now. This is my favorite method. There are many different ratios. You'll hear of the 50, 20, 30. You hear of the 50, 10, 10, 10, 10, 10. I have decided that honestly, this ratio is the one that seems to make sense for my situation, my family situation. And I think it's a very good benchmark for other women as well. So 50, 20, 10, 10, 10. 50, 20, 10, 10, 10, 50, 20, 10, 10, 10. That's the ratio that I love to use as sort of a benchmark, right? Doesn't necessarily need to be stuck in stone because like I told you, I like that flexibility, but at least it's good to have some sort of benchmark. I'm going to quickly check the chats again. Binkbe is saying you should reward. Binkbe is saying, good job, Binkbe. You should reward yourself by spending some money on something outside your budget. Yeah, so that defeats the purpose, right? That's like my people saying, oh, I exercised today. I should reward myself by eating 2 spoons of ice cream and 1 piece of cake. No. And this is why, again, what I teach is actually having a list of rewards ahead of time. So a list of things that feel good to you. For me, it's scalp massages. I love to get my scalp massage. If it's something really big, I might go for a pedicure. So, and then these are things, of course, nothing extravagant. Your brain doesn't need too much for it to be considered a reward. Even just dancing will be considered a reward because at least that feels good. So the ratio method I talked about, save and spend. Save and spend is a method that I advise for people who are really, really, really busy, but they also have they're also in a good space financially. So they are not excessively spending. So they're not overspending, they're not in debt, right? So it's sort of a method where, okay, this is what I'm saving towards, whether it's retirement and investing, or I'm saving towards a new car or something like that. They have already allocated what they want to be saving towards, and they're funneling money that way, and then they spend the rest. right? They spend the rest on their expenses, their household, childcare, or what have you. But I'm sure you can imagine that these are people who generally have their expenses are much lower than their income. So that way they're not really having to keep a close eye on their budget. This is a form of budgeting, by the way. Even though it sounds really loose and really flexible, it is still a form of budgeting. There's a plan ahead method that was established by the person that I learned financial coaching from. Her name is Kelsa Dickey. And this is a method where you use Excel spreadsheets. So there's an actual spreadsheet that she created where every pay period, every time you get paid, whether it's on the 15th of the month, the 30th of the month, you enter what is in your checking account, and then you enter your balance in your checking account, and then you start allocating towards the different expenses that way. You also have a separate spending account. So you funnel money there, and whatever is in the spending account, you can spend however you want. So again, not so detailed, but still a little bit detailed than the save then spend method. Then there's the zero-based budgeting, which honestly, I have tried, but it's just not for me. I think this kind of method will be more suited to someone like my friend who is very detailed. Actually, I have friends who use this method where every week they log into the account, they put in their expenses, they're doing all of that, checking it every week. They're really sort of meticulous with that, very detail oriented. I've tried it before. It just doesn't stick for me personally, but also a very good way to budget. I would recommend this way for anyone who is in debt and trying to get out of debt, to be honest. I would actually try this method first. This method or Kelsa's plan ahead method, whichever one seems to be a better fit, right? Because with these two methods, you can actually track your debt, right? You can actually track your debt going down. You can sort of allocate every dollar is working somewhat, and then you're also tracking your debt. So these two methods are good for people who have expenses that are a little bit higher than their income, and they're really trying to bring them down or pay off their credit card. Cash envelopes, also not for me. I'm not that careful with my belongings. So this is good for people who are very careful. So what happens is that when you get your paycheck, you go to the bank, you withdraw all the money, and then you allocate the money to different envelopes, which means when you go to the grocery store, you're spending cash. When you're going out with your friends, you're spending cash. When you're getting your hair, your nails done, you're spending cash. Because psychologically, the act of bringing out money, cash from your envelope is more painful than swipe, right? So it helps to curb your spending. And by the time you get to the checkout counter and the cash has finished, then you have to do the walk of shame, which is, no, I don't want this anymore. No, I don't want this. Can you return this? Can you return that? And so it sort of really puts that limit on you. So definitely someone who is trying to manage their spending, someone who is struggles with impulsive spending. Now, in this day and age, not as relevant, right? Because we're not really spending that much cash, especially with the pandemic. So what I recommend is actually using something like gift cards or spending cards. So kind of like the same idea. Every month when you get paid, you allocate the different amounts to different cards, right? And so the card that you go, the gift card or the spending card. I'm not talking about credit cards. I'm talking about actual spending or debit cards that you would take and say, okay, this is the amount of money that I have. It's not credit, it's not debt, but I've been able to ahead of time say X number of dollars here or whatever. And when it's finished, everybody goes home. Then finally, apps. Apps are great for people who love apps. I'm not an app person either. So essentially an app is sometimes you can connect your app to your bank account. But I personally found that, first of all, my phone is a bit distracting. And second of all, the allocations from the bank, the way they label it doesn't always make sense to me. And then also even just getting into the habit of checking the app or inputting stuff into the app didn't really work for me. So you've sort of seen that I have arranged these different budgeting systems according to my preference. So ratios, save then spend, those are two methods that we have personally used. The plan ahead method is a method that we'll try for any student first who needs to pay off debt and is trying to really get a closer look at what they're spending. Zero-based budgeting is also really good. I have tried it before, it didn't really work for me. Cash envelopes, I didn't bother because I knew how that would work. And apps, I've tried and they didn't really work for me. Now, just because they didn't work for me doesn't mean that they will not work for you. So I've given different situations and different scenarios of how you can use these methods. So I want you to think about which one sort of appeals to you, which one feels like it would be a good fit for you, which one feels like, yeah, I could definitely try this out and see if it works for me. Having said all of that, right, know that it takes, the scientists now are saying 60 days to develop a habit. So I always say, give it at least 3 months. Give this method that you pick, give it at least 3 months. It's like working out, right? Trying to exercise. I'm sure you've heard that they say, you know what, the best type of exercise is the one that you're going to be consistent with. If you're someone like me who doesn't like the idea of going outside and running on the street, there's no point in trying that, right? I already know that I need to look for something else, maybe something like Zumba, where it's more like dancing or and I know that I'm busy, my kids, I have young kids. So if I can do it at home, even better. Somebody else might have a different set of preferences. So what works for me will not work for you, and then give it time. Give it time. And so even if it's not working for the first few months, or for the first 1 week, give it a month, give it 2 months, ideally 3 months before you give up on the system, because habits do take some time to form. Okay. Now let's talk more about ratios, which to me, I believe is the simplest way to budget. It's what's going to really give you the best success and still give you a good sense of control and when it comes to managing your money. So I like to talk about the ABCs of ratio budgeting. So A for audit. So audit your spending, which is sort of like the tracking we were talking about. B, break down your expenses. So this is when we sort of really start to identify and tease things out when it comes to our expenses, knowing what we're spending our money on. And C, cash allocation, which is when we now start to funnel the money into different categories. So again, audit your spending. How much are you spending and what are you spending on, right? And then do a review of the past 3 months, because there will also be some month-to-month variability. So if you're able to do a review of the past 3 months, that will be ideal to really see, okay, where am I spending this money anyway? So doing an audit is the first thing. Then breaking it down into what your expenses are. The first step to doing this is actually sitting down, spending 5 minutes and just writing down, what are the things that are even expenses in my life? Is it rent? Is it mortgage? Is it school? Is it daycare? Is it food for the baby? Is it my manicures and pedicures? Is it my massage? Is it debt? Is it my tithe, giving? You know, all these things that you know that you spend your money on, actually write them down and then break them into different categories, right? What are the things that are sort of the fixed expenses that are non-negotiables? Right? Things that are your absolute needs that if you don't pay for it, there will be consequences. And then savings. What are you saving towards? Are you planning on buying a home in a year or planning on doing some renovations? What are you saving towards? And by the way, when I say savings, I also put investments in that category. And then what are the wants? What are the things that you enjoy? What are the things that really spice up your life a little bit? Is it going to the movies? Is it getting your nails done? Whatever it might be, is it spending on, is it spending on nice journals, right? What are the things that really make you feel good, right? I'm not one to really say that you deprive yourself of everything that makes you feel good just for the sake of budgeting, although there might be a time for some people that might be necessary, but I still believe in still finding some pleasure in when you spend your money. And then giving. Of course, I'm an advocate for giving. I believe that giving actually really helps us to manage our money more. And I also believe that, you know, when your hand is open to give, it's actually also in the perfect position to receive. So whenever I do my expenses breakdown, I also encourage that giving aspect too. Not to say that I'm imposing it on you, but I'm just saying that for me, I also prioritize it. And then paying off your debts, whether it's student loans, whether it's personal loans, whether it's credit card debt, whatever it might be, there's also a portion of your breakdown in this 50, 20, 10, 10, 10, 50, 20, 10, 10, 10 ratio breakdown that I like to use. And step 3 is now the fun part, which is the cash allocation. This is now actually saying, okay, every month at the top there, we get our income. So what is the lump sum of our income? And then how can we start dividing it into different categories based on the ratios that we have decided? I want to emphasize that the 50, 20, 10, 10, 10 ratio is really just a benchmark. And when we go through the examples, you'll see that, you know, there is still some flexibility when it comes to cash allocation. And now we are on to the examples. I'm just going to check the chat and I'm going to invite any questions that you might have, ladies. I can address them now while I switch over. Actually, no, I'll describe the examples first before I switch over my screen. Any questions, please? Okay, so let's go on to the examples, which for me is so much fun. I hope you find them at least a little bit interesting. And so the first example is of a couple. This is a couple, and they both earn an income. And so between the two of them, their income is $10,000 per month. They love to eat out. They're planning to buy a home. They also support family abroad. So they have family in different places of the world and they support them. And they also have student loans that they're paying for. The second example is of a couple, but they have 2 kids. Combined, their income is $7,000 a month. I apologize. I know most of you are in different parts of the world, but this is the currency that I've been using for the past 20 plus years. And so it's what I'm familiar with. And so just keep that in mind, but the principles are still the same, okay? So the principles are the same. So don't worry too much about the currency because the principles are still the same. So this is a family of 4. They're planning to send their kids to private school. They also love to enjoy themselves. They love to take road trips. They love to travel, experience different things as a family. And they're currently paying for a car and their mortgage. And finally, we have an entrepreneur. So she earns just 1 income. This is her income. She's not part of a couple. She's also paying student loans. She enjoys the cushy life. So her hair, her nails, she likes to look good, smell good, feel good. And she's also bootstrapping a business, basically meaning she's not getting funding. She's not getting loans. She's paying for this startup, this business all by herself. So those are the 3 examples. And I'm going to go ahead and share my screen with a breakdown of the different examples, just so you can see how the ratio system actually works out. Okay. Share. All right, so what do you ladies see now? Can you see my screen?
Yes, yes, okay. I can see.
Yes, we can.
Great. So again, just bear in mind that this is just principles. It doesn't really matter what the amount is because a ratio of $10,000 is still a ratio of 10,000 Naira, is still a ratio of 10,000 pounds. So try to keep that in mind as well, right? So first of all, if we're using the strict 50, 20, 10, 10, 10 ratio, we're talking about the couple here. So this is the couple that they are supporting family abroad. It's the 2 of them. combined, their income is $10,000 a month. And so this is what they're paying for, right? So they're also saving towards a house too. So they would need to understand that 50%, so after sort of doing that list that I talked about, writing down all their expenses, after reviewing all their expenses over the past 3 months, they've written it down, they've broken it to different categories. They realize that, okay, their rent and their utilities, their groceries, their clothing, maybe they have rentals insurance, maybe they have medical insurance or medical insurance that they pay for. Those are all necessities. Those are all needs. And whatever they do, it needs to fit into that 50% of their income, which is $5,000. Okay. Moving on to their savings, right? They have their short-term savings, which is towards this house that they want to buy. Their long-term savings, which is towards retirement. That long-term savings will actually be investments, right? And that will be $2,000 a month. And they can split it up 50-50. So 10% towards the house, 10% towards their investment. And then their wants. So the things that are not really, really necessary, they're not essentials. They're not things that if they don't have, there'll be serious consequences. So cable, internet, eating out, and other forms of entertainment, their hobbies. And because they're the type of people who love to learn, their personal learning and development. So their books, their courses, that kind of thing. 10%, they've decided that they want to give 10%. They want to tithe 10% because they're Christian. They believe that it's part of what they should be doing. And then the other 10% is towards their debts, their student loans. So this is how they would break up their own expenses. Now, say, for example, they did all of this and they realized, oh my goodness, our needs are taking up 55%. Excuse me. Our needs are taking up 55%, and we really only allocated 50%. They have a few choices. They can either go to their wants and say, you know what, maybe we can negotiate our cable. Maybe we can stop eating out for a while and start looking for maybe some free activities that we can do. With our personal learning and development, maybe we can go to the library instead, or borrow books instead, or look for free courses instead of spending $1,000 on our wants, and we can channel some of that money towards our needs. Or they could look at their needs and say, you know what, we're spending too much on groceries. Maybe we should start meal planning and bringing our groceries down to a more reasonable amount. And so because they have this structure, they're able to see, okay, we're overspending somewhere. How can we shuffle things around to make things such that we're not going beyond our budget? So that's the first example. The second example is a family of 4 that earn $7,000 a month. Their needs are a little bit different. So they have a mortgage, they have utilities, they have a baby, they have childcare for their kids, they have groceries for more people, clothing for more people, medical and transportation, right? And so when you look at this, you can see that in this case, maybe they started off like the first couple and they were spending 50% on their needs. But then they realized, you know what, this is not realistic anymore. And we've tried everything that we can. So we need to bump that up a little bit. So instead of 50% on their needs, they're actually spending 60% on their needs, right? And what that means is that their saving percentage is, it's actually higher. So they have gotten to the point where they're like, you know what, we're in our 30s, we're pushing 40, we've heard about this investment thing, and we really want to start investing. So they make it a priority. They make it a priority. And so they're actually saving more. And because, you know, private school is expensive, they have 2 kids, but vacation is something that's really important to them. They're saving towards their vacation, they're saving towards private school, and they're also investing. But if you look at their wants are actually much lower than the 10% based on the standard, the 50, 20, 10, 10, 10. Their wants are actually 5%, right? So maybe the internet, maybe they're sharing with their neighbor or something, or maybe cable, they managed to get like a really cheap deal with their cable, or maybe they eliminated cable altogether. That's an option. right? Their hobbies, they're all the things that they enjoy doing. They also include there. This might also include sending money. No, who are the people that are sending money abroad? I believe it was this couple. So they could be here instead of, maybe some days God is still working on their heart. Let's assume that. So maybe they're tithing 5%, even though they know they should be giving more, because they're giving 5% to their family, but they're hoping to, get back on track with their tithing, right? So all these things are pretty flexible. So going back to the initial couple, because I know that I'd mentioned that they send money abroad. So this giving could actually include that, with the hopes of increasing their tithe, right? Even though we know that we're not perfect. Let's just keep it that way. We're all not perfect. And then, yeah, so going back to this other couple, right? So their wants are much smaller. So maybe they've mastered the art of taking their kids to free parks, or really going on picnics, or really trying to spend more time with family, going to friends' homes instead of eating out and going and doing all of that. So they've really managed to shrink down their wants, because their expenses, their needs are much higher. And then they're giving and tithing 10%. And finally, for the CEO babe, the entrepreneur babe who earns $5,000 a month, her needs are much smaller as well, because it's just her. She's paying rent, she's paying her groceries for just her, and all of that. And so she's managed to keep her expenses at 40% instead of the 50% that the 50-20-10-10-10 ratio suggests, right? And what that means is she's still saving at the recommended 10%. She puts 5% towards her business capital. She puts 5% towards retirement, because she figures once the business gets off the ground, she can increase that retirement contribution. Her wants are also small, right? She doesn't spend too much on cable, on internet, but she definitely loves to pamper herself. So majority of that budget goes towards self-pampering. She's also a learner, but she really keeps her learning budget really, really low. Her tithes, she gives 15%. Maybe God has really done a good work in her heart, and she's like, you know what, I really want to give back, and she gives 15%. Maybe 10% is tithe, 5% is offering. I don't know how she splits it up, but that is sort of how she has divided her money, her giving. And then the 10%, like I mentioned, she has student loans. So that 10% goes towards her student loans. Okay. Any questions about the breakdown that I've provided? Any questions about the examples? Is it making sense? Are there things that seem to be is there anything that you see that makes you feel like, oh, this might not work for me? That's actually what I want to know. Is there anything that makes you feel like this might not work for me? It is making plenty sense. Thank you, Tokbe.
Okay. As you were going through the examples and the breakdown, just made me realize that when I just got married during the early years, I think we will pass as the example one. We had less responsibilities and the likes. But now I'm just looking at that example too, and like, wow, this is where we are.
Yeah.
Oh my God. And with especially in Nigeria, that there's a lot of inflation in commodities and household items. It's really, really, really difficult to keep up with. And I'm actually big on finances. Like I do the finance management in the house. My husband just practically dumps his salary on me, and just manage. I try my best to make sure that we still keep within the budget. And for the past 2 months, it's been crazy. Like it's been really, really crazy. And I'm just looking at how. Anyways, let me see how it works. What's more.
Yeah. Thank you so much for sharing that, Tokwe. It's so true. I mean, in Nigeria, I know it can be quite tough. And I also want to emphasize that budgeting is just a small part of the big picture. It's a small part of the big picture, because the truth is that there will be times when we will fall on hard times and things really have to change. And so that's why I also talk about having an emergency fund, right? Which can also be a challenge too. I also try to talk about how can we diversify our streams of income. So if we can't control the expenses, is there something that we can do to control the income? And sort of looking at all the different intersecting parts of this whole money management, financial well-being. But in a country like Nigeria, I can only imagine how tough it is even to plan. It's even to plan when you have no idea what your expenses are going to be like a month from now, 2 months from now. All I will say is that we are aiming for good enough. We're doing our best, good enough. And I think as women, especially women who have ambition, women who have goals, women who have expectations of ourselves, we can be very hard on ourselves sometimes. We can really be very hard on ourselves. And sometimes we find ourselves in situations where it's so out of your control what's happening. The things that have happened are so out of your control. And then we start to regret or beat ourselves up. But I really want you to understand that everything that I say today, everything that I do, even in the emails that I send, the posts that I do, the talks that I send out, it's just for guidance. It's for guidance. And for you to say, okay, even if I take 1 or 2% of what I've learned or heard today, that's headed in the right direction. So I know that things can be very challenging, but ultimately, I'm just here to let you know, continue to do your best. It sounds like you're doing a great job. It sounds like all of you are trying. At least you're here today. That shows me that you are trying. And that is definitely a step in the right direction. Well done. So Binke says, with my kids, there's always one thing or other that comes up at school. Unplanned expenses all the time. Unplanned expenses all the time. And Binke, I hear you. I know, and it can be very annoying. This is why, I'm really sorry, ladies. My nose is just, this is why having that safety net, again, something that I know that can be very challenging, because you're wondering, okay, if I can barely keep up with all these expenses, how am I supposed to come up with a safety net, an emergency fund, backup money? But it comes down to, again, these ratios and saying, okay, where can I cut back? Where can I cut back, even if it's just temporary, so we can start funneling money towards this unplanned expenses account, right? Thank you. This unplanned expenses account, right? Just having an idea, okay, these are the things that could come up, right? For me, I have to pay association fees, and usually they come up in the middle of the year, and I'm like, okay, like I wasn't quote unquote expecting this, but we have a bucket of money for these kinds of things, right? Or we had to change the battery of the car a few months ago, also an unplanned expense. But thankfully, we had, again, a reserve of money that we could say, okay, no problem, let's move things out of that and pay for the car, the battery of the car. So I say all that to say this is all interconnected. So budgeting here, emergency fund there, increasing your income there, lowering your expenses there, all of it comes together to form this almost like a dance, right, that we do when it comes to our financial well-being. It's never one size fits all. And you might notice that in one season of your life, as Tokwe was saying, one system might work for you, but then you might have to change to a different, stricter system just because of the situation that you're in right now. Thank you all for the contribution. So I'm going to go back to the presentation, because at this point, we are just about to wrap up. Yeah. At this point, we're just about to wrap up. And the final thing that I really want to say is something that we have been saying, or I've been saying, whether in code, or I've been saying implicitly, or I've been saying, maybe I have said it explicitly, but ultimately it's getting to the point where we are spending less than we earn. This is one of the major financial principles. And I said, and we've mentioned it, that it can be very, very difficult. But if inflation is a problem and if expenses are a problem, can we get to a point where we are earning more money? Right? Can we get to a point where we're getting creative with the skills that we have, the things that people are constantly asking us to do for free? Can we start charging for these things? Can we get the courage to ask our boss for a raise, right? Even if we feel like we don't deserve it yet. Pinkpe, you had shared a story a few weeks ago, and it made me so happy how you had increased your prices for a client, and at the last minute you wanted to back out, but ultimately you just stuck to it, and you get what you ask for. And so if expenses, you've done your best and you've been really honest and you've looked at everything and you said, you know what, there really isn't much we can do to minimize these expenses. What about looking on the other side, which is the income? How can I increase my income? But the goal really at the end of the day is to spend less than you earn. That's our goal at the end of the day. And that's it. Any questions, ladies? Thank you so much for your participation. Any further questions? There'll be a replay, so I'll send it out. That's the only thing I learned from you. Spending less than you earn. Because honestly, that's the key. It's really that simple. Either you spend less or you make more. That's just it. Okay, if there are no further questions, I want to just let you know that next month, October, we're not having a wealth clinic, but we're going to be doing something even more exciting, which will be a free boot camp. So Money Revamp boot camp is going to be happening. I believe October 25th is when we're starting. It's going to be 1 week of really addressing more of these things. I'll be sending out some action points, some recommendations. There'll be prizes. So it's really just to get our minds ready for the end of the year and the beginning of next year. So watch out for that. I'll definitely be sending emails, notifications about that. And if you want to sign up now, you can go ahead and sign up now. This is the link. I'll also be sending it out in the email. But if you're here and you're like, okay, Yewande, I heard you, this is good. The boot camp sounds great, but I really want to talk to you more one-on-one. Set up a free consultation with me, okay? This is where you can go for that. Meet Dr. Yewande, bit.ly/meet Dr. Yewande, completely free. We can just talk about what your challenges are and see if my course or if my programs really are a good fit for you. But either way, it would be nice to just talk through some of these things. And I believe that is the end of the presentation. So I'll leave this up here just in case you want to register or share with your friends. But I'm really looking forward to this one because it's going to be more fun, more engaging, more interacting. We're all going to come together as a community and cheer each other on. And I'm hoping that 1 week will really help change people's thinking patterns, set up habits like we discussed when it comes to our money. You are welcome. Thank you for coming. Thank you for coming. Thank you for participating. Thank you for your questions. And I will see you guys in the community on Instagram or wherever it is that we hang out together. All right, ladies, take care. Bye. Bye-bye.